Well, hello, welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So last week, you may recall in the video blog, I mentioned that there was a Supreme Court case that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to really review the decision. Well, I've had a chance to review the decision. The case that we're going to be discussing in this week's blog is entitled Timbs versus the State of Indiana, or Timbs versus Indiana. It was a unanimous decision. It was authored by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg with concurring opinions by Justice Gorsuch and Justice Thomas. The case involves the Eighth Amendment's excessive fines clause. Now, as many of you know, as we've discussed before, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, those initially were not applicable to states interfering with your rights. They were only designed to prevent the federal government from interfering with your rights. After the adoption of the 14th Amendment, a lot of fundamental rights became incorporated directly to state constitutions. Basically, pre-14th Amendment, if the state wanted to say you can't say certain things, they could get away with doing so. After the 14th Amendment, freedom of speech is a fundamental right. It's incorporated to state constitutions. Now the states cannot abrogate your First Amendment rights. But what is a fundamental right? Well, it's whatever the Supreme Court says is a fundamental right, and they have to affirmatively do it. The Eighth Amendment's excessive fines clause has never been incorporated to the states until now. Now, the reason this is important has to do with what we call asset forfeiture. In the particular case at bar, Timbs was a heroin addict, or heroin dealer is probably a better way of describing him. Anyways, he has a Range Rover that he had received as a form of inheritance from his father's passing. Range Rover at the time is worth about $40,000. He's arrested for trafficking heroin, and the police want to seize the Range Rover worth $40,000 as part and parcel of his criminal enterprise. The fine in Indiana, interestingly enough, for trafficking in heroin apparently is $10,000. So this is 4 times what the fine would be. The state court says you can't do that, Indiana. It's clearly a violation of his Eighth Amendment rights. The appellate court agrees with the state court. Indiana, wanting that damn Range Rover, appeals to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court says, yeah, fine, we'll go ahead and we'll say that the Eighth Amendment doesn't apply. This then goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the important part of this decision is Ruth Bader Ginsburg's understanding of how this is incorporated to the states, and she and the rest of the majority of the court says that it falls within what's called the Due Process Clause. Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch disagree with her. They feel that it falls within the Privileges and Immunities Clause, and candidly, I think they're right. I think that Ginsburg, while she came to the correct conclusion, she got through it in a pathway that's dubious at best. Anyways, without going into too much greater detail, I highly encourage you to read the blog. It's a little wonky, so stay with it. If you have any questions, you can always email me at stephen@artemishq.com. And as always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. And until we see each other again for coffee, stay safe.